Hi College Success, this is your lecture video for chapter 12, the very last textbook chapter. All right, so this kind of starts bringing it all together. We're at the end of the textbook. This is going to talk about like career planning, which we've already done some of. So in a way, it's kind of like a summation chapter in terms of your career path, your major, that type of thing. So first things, here are some things to just kind of think about. How ready are you for your career? Are you certain about the major that you have selected, or are you ready to choose your major soon? Do you know what kind of jobs you can get with your major? Do you know what you're going to do kind of in the first year after you graduate, or each year as you get ready to graduate, what to do to kind of prepare for those steps, and the resources on our campus to help. So here are the objectives of the chapter, talking about, how a career applies to you, campus resources, and just self-awareness as it relates to career goals. So why are you worried? Well, hopefully this is something that, most of you should be thinking about anyway, right? So choosing a career, even if you are a CCP student and you're very early in your career path with your college career, and how do you kind of think about career myths? So we're going to talk about some career myths here shortly. The difference between a job and a career: a job is something that you just do for money, right? It's not something that you necessarily have a passion for. It's going to pay the bills. Now, you can like your job, but it's not necessarily what you intend to do for the rest of your life. A career, though, is something is long-term. You have a passion for it. You have invested time and energy and education and all of those things to get to that point. So here are some different career myths, and of course your textbook will go into, more detail about each of these things. I always, recommend that you go in here and you take a look. There's like a little example story, some figures, and here's a bunch of myths. And you can see with each of the myths, it'll go through and kind of debunk it. So I encourage you, if any of those myths look interesting to you, go in here and really look at the debunking of that myth. So, you're going to have no problem getting hired and making a lot of money. That's a myth, unfortunately. There's not just one perfect job for you. Is it too late to change your career? That's a myth. No one's going to hire you because you're just a student. Your career path should follow a neat straight line. So those are all different myths. And again, inside your actual textbook here, go through and make sure, especially if there's one that you personally believe, go through and see why that is a myth and it's not true. Here are some statements, especially for anyone who is still maybe deciding on their major, or maybe you're thinking about changing your major. If you've ever heard something like, "You are so good at fill in the blank, you should do this." Sometimes those kind of statements can be helpful and sometimes they're not, because you don't want to do something that someone else sees for you. You want to make sure that you're doing something for yourself. So here's like the career planning cycle. And again, some of this should seem familiar because we did talk about a lot of this in previous weeks, especially with your career services assignment. What are things you could be doing now and what resources can you add to your resume? This is the career planning cycle. Before you choose a career, or even if you've already selected your major, things to just know about yourself, kind of your interests, your personality, your values. And here are examples of some assessments you can take, some of which we've already taken in this class as part of that career services assignment. So your career, coach assessment will give you that personality to let you know kind of your personalities. There's interest inventories. The more you know about yourself, the better you can feel about either a decision that you have made or the decision that you need to make in terms of your career choice. And then just reflecting, thinking about, what do I know about myself? What do I enjoy? What do others know about me? And you can ask others how they see you. That doesn't mean that, that should take more weight, but it's always nice to sometimes have an outside perspective. And so just really making sure that you are taking time to explore and think about the career that you would like to have. A major is an important decision, but sometimes even more important than that are just the values and the skills that you're learning as you go throughout your college career, because you can change your major, but certain things, are going to apply and transfer to different areas of your life regardless of the career that you choose. So this talks a little bit about kind of the values that you hold and how those should play a role in your career choice. All right. So some things and we've talked about this as well, some things you want to know about, using resources like the BLS.gov. I've shown you this site before, like taking a look and seeing, searching for your career up here. I think I've used physical therapy now a couple times this semester. So, really looking and seeing, what are what's the information connected to this particular field? You know, going to our homepage and looking at the career coach and searching, you know, under browse careers, looking here and looking at that information. So just knowing more about the industry and the kind of expectations that you're going to have in each particular one. All right, so how can you gain workplace knowledge even now as a student? You know, what can you do? Well, you can join clubs on campus. And I know sometimes you can think, okay, how can I ever possibly have time to join clubs? There's always, I don't want to say always, there's time. It just depends on how you manage your time, right? So there are different clubs and organizations on campus. You know, under Info for Current Students, there's a whole list of student organizations. I'm pretty sure I've brought this up before, but I'm just reminding, some of these are very connected to your career. You know, and some of them are just for fun, but there's a lot of research that does support the fact that if you can get involved in the campus club or organization, it not only obviously can build your resume because you're getting a little bit of networking and experience through that club, but it actually has academic benefits. You're more likely to have a higher GPA, to retain semester to semester, and you're more likely to graduate because of those connections and that networking both with your peers and faculty, and then hopefully in people in the job market. And some of these clubs honestly do not take that much time. They meet maybe once a month. Sometimes they have events where family is invited. So if you have children, that's not, you know, an issue. So just kind of thinking about where do you want your time and your energy to go. Taking advantage of networking events and programs like job fairs. Some of you might not be thinking about job fairs quite yet. You might not be there, but we do hold a lot of job fairs, and there's a lot of employers who come to our campus. So even just visiting their booths as you're walking around campus to try to maybe get some informal information. So just as many resources as possible, you know, looking to see, are there clubs I can join? Is there volunteer experience? You know, even if it's one day a year, you can consistently show on a resume, every year I volunteer for, you know, X organization for their 5K or whatever it might be. You know, if you do that for a few years, that's one day a year, but it shows a standing kind of commitment to that field. You know, if you're going into the medical field, you know, there might be some kind of event or something you can do through Altman Hospital. Anything you can do that's going to show that you are trying to kind of dip your toe in the water, if you will. Obviously, a more like committed would be like an internship or a part-time job or something like that. Something that you can do over a certain break or over the summer or anything like that. Some of you may not have an option. You have to do practicals or shadowing or student teaching or something like that. That's kind of built into your degree plan anyway. You also want to really make sure you're focusing on your transferable skills, those skills that no matter what field you're in, they're going to be beneficial. So good communication skills is going to be important, whether you're in education, whether you're in IT, whether you're in business, it does not matter. So think about your transferable skills, those things that sometimes called like soft skills. What do you have that is going to be beneficial to you no matter what area you are going into? And here are the top 4 typically asked for from employers. You know, critical thinking, problem solving, working with other people, being professional, and your communication. So is there an area that you just need to really hone in on? And some of our student success workshops did talk about some of these throughout the semester. So even taking like an informal 1-hour workshop, sometimes there's whole classes devoted to these, but looking for those opportunities to kind of brush up, because yes, your technical skills will get you a job, you know, knowing how to do your specific field work, but then these are the things that are going to help you keep your job and move up the ranks, you know, move into your career placement where you want to be. So it's important to focus on those things as well. Also, you want to think about getting your resume ready, you know, thinking about your social media activity. Some students don't necessarily think about that right now. In our, you know, career services department, again, I know I've shown you this before, but as another reminder, there is lots of information here about internships, getting your resume ready, looking for job fairs. So this is a great resource for that purpose. So making sure that your resume is ready. And I can tell you it's so much easier to start your resume now and add to it later than 3 years from now thinking back, oh my gosh, what did I do 2.5 years ago? You know, just, even if it's just an informal Word doc or something on your computer, that you can keep track of what you've done. Maybe if you've taken any workshops, such as one you might have done already this semester for this class, you know, keeping track of that information so that you can have it ready to go, so it's a little less cumbersome when you go to put your whole resume together. Also, make sure that whenever you are using social media, you want to be aware that social media activity is there forever. So when you're young, posting pictures of certain things or certain posts, just be aware that employers can find that information. Even if you delete it, it can still be found. So just making sure that you're not putting yourself out there in a certain way. LinkedIn is great, but you also want to make sure you have a real resume. Some people think that networking is the same as social media. It's not. You can definitely use social media to network, but they are not always the same thing. So just be mindful of that as well. And sometimes social media is a great networking tool depending on the field that you're in. So just being kind of aware of your online presence and how you can use that to your advantage. Some of you will have to build a portfolio for your career. It just kind of depends on what path you're going into. So there's information about portfolio building and then networking. The saying goes, it's not what you know, it's who you know, which is true to an extent. It's really important to start getting network connections, and that starts while you're in college. It starts now, making connections to the teachers who teach your specific career content, information. It's your peers, making sure that you go to job fairs, that you go to clubs and organizations, you start making all of these connections. And so this really does give a lot of tips on how to network. One of the things that in our face-to-face class is we do what's called an elevator pitch. So an elevator pitch is about a 30-second kind of introduction about who you are, just real quickly, who you are, what you've done, and what your goals are. And it's, if you were to write it out, it'd be about a paragraph long. That way, when you go to a networking opportunity, or even if you go in for an interview, because one of the first questions they tend to ask is, tell me about yourself. You can kind of have that ready to go in your proverbial back pocket, and you're not sitting there going, I don't know. You just have it ready. Another thing I like to really remind my students is check your email addresses that you're using. If you do not use your Stark State username, you want to make sure that you're using one that's professional. I had a student one semester, pole dancer at Yahoo. Funny to look at, right? And you think of one thing, he was a firefighter, so that's the pole dancer, but not very professional. So you want to make sure that you have a professional account, professional email if you're not using your school email. And then you also want to be thinking about who you're going to ask for your letter of recommendation. You can start thinking about that now. Are you going to use a teacher, a former employer, your advisor, whoever it might be? So thinking about that can be helpful now. All right, so that is, and then it ends, with Maslow's hierarchy, just really and connecting to kind of where you are with your career. Your job is kind of your base where a lot of you might be now. Your career is where you're hoping to be, and then finding your purpose, which can be embedded inside your career. All right, as always, I encourage you to take a look at Chapter 12 a little bit more in depth. Take some time to read through, especially maybe those myths or the networking piece, which is really helpful. And I will see you back when it is time to talk about your assignments connected for this chapter.